Welcome to our discussion video for evaluating variances from standard costs. So, our point of view, since the course is management reporting, is at the eye of the strategic managers. So, we look at, as management accountants, we look at the variances and how we report the variances to top management to make decisions for the company. So, our orientation now is we already know the basic ways on how to compute for the standard costing analysis, the variance analysis, as we have already met uh, this in our cost accounting and in undergrad managerial accounting subjects. So ang titingnan natin dito ay kung papaano natin ipapackage itong variance we already computed as a report, as a budget performance report directed to the higher management or the strategic managers. Okay. So the Chapter 9 standard costing and variances is still under the planning and evaluating tools under the decision making phase. So before we proceed with the concept and the entire subject variance analysis, let us look now at our focus company, BMW Group, as an introduction, as a backgrounder. When you play a sport, you are evaluated with respect to how well you perform compared to a standard or to a competitor. Just like in bowling, for example, your score is compared to a perfect score of 300 or to the scores of your competitors. In this class, you are compared to performance standards. So the standards are the numerical passing grades given to you. These standards are often described in terms of letter grades in some other schools, but in our school, we use numerical ratings, which provide a measure of how well one achieve the class objectives. So in your job, you are also evaluated according to performance standards. So kapag nagkaroon na tayo ng trabaho, we are also measured by the performance standards set by the company. Just as your class is evaluated, managers are evaluated according to the goals and the plans of the company. BMW uses manufacturing standards as its automobile assembly plants to guide performance. The Mini Cooper, the famous Mini Cooper, a BMW Group car, is manufactured in a modern facility in Oxford, England. There are a number of performance targets used in this plant. For example, the body shell is welded by more than 250 robots to so as to be 2 to 3 times stiffer than rival cars. In addition, the body shell dimensions are tested to the accuracy of the width of a human hair. Imagine the width of a human hair. Such performance standards are not surprising given the automotive racing background of John Cooper, the designer of the original Mini Cooper. So performance is often measured as the difference between the actual and the planned results. The performance is often measured as actual versus the planned. So in more ways, we will discuss this in this chapter. So our learning objectives to describe the types of standards and how they are established. Objective 2 to describe and illustrate how standards are used in budgeting, to compute and interpret direct materials and direct labor variances, and also interpret factory overhead controllable and volume variances, and then describe and illustrate the recording and reporting of standards and variances. For decision making, we look at the use of direct labor time variance in evaluating staff performance in a service setting. Okay. So what does a standard as a review all about? The standards, these are goals or performance goals. We look at standards as we look at our goals. So we are measured in a manufacturing company, you are measured by performance goals based on the following product costs: direct material, direct labor, and factory overhead. Okay? So accounting systems that use standards for product costs are called the standard cost system or the standard costing system in some books. So that is the background of what standard costing is all about. There are two types of standards as we differentiate standards. One is the ideal standards or the theoretical standards or the 100% basis standards. So these standards can only be achieved only under perfect operating conditions. Ibig sabihin, kapag perfect yung operations mo, there is no idle time, there is no machine breakdown, there are no material spoilage. So, under the normal standards or the currently attainable standards, or in some books are referred to as the practical standards, these can be attained with reasonable effort. So, in these standards, it allows for normal machine breakdowns, production difficulties, mistakes, human errors, and among others. So it is said that when reasonable standards are used, just like a normal or the currently attainable standards, employees focus more on costs and are more likely to put forth their best efforts. Kasi under the ideal standards, kahit gaano pa siya 100% best ang ibigay niya, it cannot happen because uh, the machines are meant to break down at some point. Idle time happens in cases where there are no inputs or supplies or nagka-problema. um, it is inevitable. So these are just theoretical or ideal standards. So employees tend to be more productive under practical or currently attainable standards. So therefore, it is the responsibility also of management accountants to look whether the standards should be revised after careful review and evaluation. So there are criticisms under the standard costing. One is that standards limit operating improvements by discouraging improvement beyond the standard. Because kapag nag-set tayo ng standard, ang mindset ng managers and all the subordinates is that kapag na-achieve na natin yung standard ay okay na tayo. So it discourages improvement that is beyond the standard. So kung mas mataas pa doon sana sinet na standard ay better. But it discourages improvement dahil kumbaga na-achieve mo na yung quota mo, na-achieve mo na yung level of level kung saan ikaw ay i-measure at 100%. So bakit mo pa tataasan or lalagyan ng additional effort? So it discourages improvement. Next, standards are too difficult to maintain in a dynamic manufacturing environment, resulting in stale standards. So the standard should be carefully reviewed and revised periodically or as the need arises because of a dynamic manufacturing environment, especially now that the digitization, digital technologies, and innovations has made manufacturing processes dynamic. Standards can cause employees to lose sight of the larger objectives of the organization by focusing only on efficiency improvement. So, what does it mean? What are the larger objectives of the organization? Well, the primary focus of the organization is of a business organization is the creation of profit, and the larger objective for that is the creation of a larger market share, uh, the creation of customer value, the provision of high quality of products or services. But because of a standard, the employees and some managers think that when they save or when they become cost efficient, they are performing well. So ang focus ay laging nandoon sa paggastos at uh, sa paggastos dahil you are measured based on uh, cost efficiency, for example. So ang lagi mo lang goal ay hindi mo masobrahan yung gastos mo kasi ganito yung standard at yung in terms of the benefits or the revenues ay ma-achieve mo. So it refocuses our managers or our employees from the larger objectives of the organization to more of a clerical function of cost efficiency. Nakafocus na lang doon sa pagtitipid, pag-maintain ng pag-achieve na tong mga ah, standards as performance goals ng bawat employee rather than creating value, customer value, giving better quality for the goods and services, and among others. Standards can cause employees to unduly focus on their own operations to the possible harm of other operations that rely on them. Because the mindset is that ang bawat unit or department ng organization ay i-measure based on whether it operates within or beyond the standards. Normally kasi yung mga standards na yan ay standard on the cost. So kung binigyan ka lang ng ganitong amount of cost, dapat within that cost lang. Hindi ka dapat sumobra kasi magiging unfavorable na ang operations mo dyan. Mas magiging mataas ang costing mo dyan. So ang nagiging focus na niya ngayon ay on its own. Gusto niya maka-goal or makakota. So hindi na niya the connections between departments, the relationship between departments in the organization will be unduly sacrificed. Ganun siya. So regardless of these criticisms, standards are still used widely. In addition, the standards are only uh, one part of the performance evaluation system used by most companies. So we will look at more of that in the succeeding discussions. Okay, let's proceed. Under the budgetary performance evaluation as prepared by most management accountants, in Chapter 8, as we look at the budget, the master budget assists the company in planning, directing, and controlling the performance. The control function or the budgetary performance evaluation compares the actual performance against the set budget. So, kaya siya connected. Ngayon, i-compare na natin yung actual performance versus the budget na diniscuss natin on the preceding module or chapter, yung chapter 8, yung budgetary ay yung budgeting, 'di ba? Ando lahat master budget, operating budget, financial budget among others. So before we compare, we must analyze first the concepts of um, the standard costing, the standard price, and the standard quantity as used in computing for your standard cost. Please look at your exhibit 1. This is the standard cost for XL jeans. So our inputs in our manufacturing process are direct material, labor, and then overhead. We have our standard price for particular input, standard quantity for particular input, and then when you multiply the price and the quantity at standard price at standard rates, we get the standard cost. And when you add all of this comprise of your total standard cost. So this is total standard cost will now be compared to your actual cost per unit or kung total yan as a total. And then, once we look at this, please look at Exhibit 2 because when the actual is greater than the standard, whether it is per unit or whether it is in total, kapag mas mataas ang actual versus the standard, it only means that gumastos ka ng ah, mas malaki kaysa sa dapat na ginastos mo lang because the standard is your performance goal. kaya siya unfavorable. Pero kung mas mababa yung nagastos mo kesa sa yung performance goal measured by the standard cost, ibig sabihin nakatipid ka. Kaya nga, yun ay favorable cost variance. So, ito yung dinidiscuss ko kanina. The tendency is that managers always wants to achieve the favorable variance. So, nagtitipid na lang siya. So, ano ang nasa-sacrifice sometimes when we look at savings? Means pwedeng maapektuhan yung quality of our product. Kasi masyadong nakafocus tayo on our favorable uh, costing variance. Kaya nga ang sinasabi, uh, refocusing away from the larger objectives of the company. So that is one criticism. But it is the responsibility of management accountant to report uh, centers who are who are registering an unfavorable cost and a favorable cost variances. It is the responsibility. So we look at the budget performance report comparing the actual cost, the standard cost, and then the variances. So ganun yung preparation ng budget performance report. We will not deal more kasi nga andito naman sa discussion yung kung paano natin kino-compute yung standard costing. Yung standard costing is just computed as the standard prices multiplied by your standard quantity. The actual cost naman, makikita naman natin ito on our financial statements, on our journal entries kasi marerecord in our T accounts, on our ledgers, makikita naman natin kung magkano yung actual cost related to material, labor, and then overhead. Okay, let's segregate. The total manufacturing cost variances are comprised, since these are inputs, merong variances doon sa mismong detalye ng input. Like material, the material variance is coming from the price and the quantity variances. Labor coming from the rate and the time variances. The overhead coming from the controllable and then the volume variances. Okay, let's proceed more. Remember, we will not be detailing the computation of these variances because this is management reporting subject. So we look at how we report the variances to top management and not how we compute these variances. Ganun ang orientation natin dito. So therefore, dapat the basics of computation of variances ay alam mo na by this time. Okay? Our orientation is on management reporting. Okay. Tingnan lang natin itong direct material variance relationships. These are the actual cost, these are the standard costs. Okay? The standard cost, walang problema kasi lahat standard. Actual cost, walang problema kasi lahat ay at actual quantity and prices. Ang pinagkaiba is on the actual quantity and the standard price kasi dito natin makukompute yung direct material price and then direct material quantity. So therefore, kapag direct material price ang pinag-uusapan, you change the price, actual price compared to the standard price multiplied by your actual quantity. And kapag quantity naman ang pinag-uusapan, actual quantity and then standard quantity ang kino-compare natin, but we use standard price. Okay? And when we total these variances, we get the total material cost variance. Okay, let's proceed with these pathways challenge because this will guide us as we provide consultancy work to our top management. Variances are useful for comparing what actually happened to what was expected, but even more importantly, variances help management understand why actual results were different from expectations. So, pinapaliwanag kasi ng variances, lalo na kapag dinetalye na natin yung variances up to the most detailed possible, kung saan nag-arise yung difference dun sa actual versus the expectations na sinasabi niya dito. For example, is the Deere company. This is subject to exchange rate fluctuations. This is a multinational company. Exchange rates represent the price at which different currencies around the world can be purchased. Exchange rates vary over time and can affect a company's operating income. Since Deere purchases goods and services using many currencies around the world, changes in exchange rates affect its operating budgets and income. So, the key issue in analyzing and interpreting variances is controllability. So ang sinasabi dito, Deere Company is engaged into purchasing but merong inclusion of foreign currencies kasi nga ah, sa ibang bansa binibili yung ibang inputs to production. So ang additional information as provided here is that it affects the operating budget and the income. So, what does controllability states? It is said that if a variance is controllable for a given employee, it means that the employee can exert effort to influence the size and direction of the variance. For example, the direct material quantity variance may be controllable by the production supervisor who may be able to take actions to decrease the waste. Kaya nga, in the cases in the CPA board exam, as I see it, there are questions where who is responsible for a material quantity variance. Merong mga ganong questions. So, ang sagot doon is that the production officer, production supervisor, because they are in control of what amount or what quantities of inputs or raw materials to purchase. Pwede kasi nilang makontrol yung amount na binibili nila as evidenced by the purchase order para mabawasan yung inventory level na mataas at yung wastage na yan. So, the key issue, kaya niya sinabi is the controllability. So, we pinpoint responsibility to those who are in control of the variances. Kung sino ang may in control doon. Okay. To end my discussion for the first part, um, let's read this critical thinking or judgment. Assume a Brazilian purchasing agent for Deere purchases direct materials right after the value of the Brazilian real, the currency of real, declines. As a result, the purchasing agent spends more to purchase direct materials than budgeted. Okay? Should the purchasing agent be held accountable for the higher cost of the direct materials due to changes in the exchange rate? So siya po ay Brazilian purchasing agent. So ang hawak niyang currency ay Brazilian real. So siya daw ay bumili when the time that the currency Brazilian real is at its low point or mababa ang value ng pera ng Brazilian real. So therefore, kung mababa ang value ng Brazilian real, kakaunti lang ang mabibili mo given a particular amount of money. Therefore, ang dami niyang nagastos to buy a particular volume or quantity of inputs. So the question here for your judgment is that should the purchasing agent be accountable because of the higher cost of the direct materials na binili niya dahil doon sa changes in the exchange rate? So I will leave that question. Actually, the suggested answer is at the end of the chapter, but I want you to first think before you proceed with the suggested answer, given the concept of controllability in variance. Are we going to pinpoint responsibility or accountability to this Brazilian purchasing agent? So that would be I will leave that to you, that question I will leave to you, and we will answer on the succeeding video for this module. Thank you. Please continue on the succeeding video for the answer. Thank you.